In the final stretch of our series on Israel, we bid farewell to the ancient and holy city of Jerusalem and travel to its polar opposite on the Mediterranean, the young metropolis Tel Aviv, the country's most modern, most liberal, and most cosmopolitan city.
So join us. I'm David Sadran, and this is Executive Class. If this scene doesn't move you, I don't know what will.
Leaving Jerusalem is never easy. The holy city is much too ingrained in our culture to simply say goodbye to. In extreme cases, some fall into a deep melancholy, even depression. Others leave with a burning obsession with religion, and not a few have experienced existential confusion. Medical experts have an actual term for it: the Jerusalem Syndrome. A psychotic state brought about by religious excitement, induced by overexposure to the holy sites and the frenzied pilgrims of Jerusalem. So before suffering from the syndrome that afflicts so many other tourists, perhaps it's best to find a place away from the madness. To a quiet place like Abu Ghosh, a predominantly Arab town on a hill along the Jerusalem-Tel Aviv highway. It's impossible to escape the topic of faith in Israel, so even Abu Ghosh figures in the Bible. It's believed the Ark of the Covenant was once based here. The Crusaders too built a church and a monastery in the 12th century, run today by Catholic Benedictines. The medieval Church of the Lord's Resurrection was built on the spot where the Crusaders believed Jesus appeared to his disciples at Emmaus after his resurrection. But since this is not Jerusalem, these holy events don't get much attention, and the locals, they don't seem that interested in promoting their town's spiritual credentials either. Instead of pilgrims, art historians prefer to visit, to marvel at the best preserved Crusader building in Israel and one of the oldest medieval frescoes in the world. If Jerusalem's mosques are symbols of nationalist aspirations, the old mosque of Abu Ghosh has no pretensions. It's simply a mosque, a local house of worship. So even if the town won't quench your spiritual thirst, it will at least satisfy your physical hunger. This is where most guidebooks and travel websites on Israel say you can find the best Arabic street food in the country.
The hummus?
Bon appetit.
Shukran. There's a beautiful Crusader church nearby. There's a second largest mosque in Israel, but there's another reason why people come all the way from Jerusalem to Abu Ghosh, and it's for this. It's the hummus, said to be the best in the entire country.
Hummus is a dip or spread made from cooked mashed chickpeas, blended with tahini, olive oil, lemon juice, salt and garlic, and often served with flat bread. Every country, every town, every restaurant and home in the Middle East has its own recipe. Abu al-Abed follows its own recipe, and the hummus is fantastic.
So creamy, so rich and flavorful, and with a little bit of the spice on it. It's got this really nice kick.
Falafel is another common Middle Eastern treat made with chickpeas, shaped into donut balls and deep-fried in olive oil. Cilantro and parsley give falafel its distinctive green color. And while we're at it, why not some grilled skewered meat? All halal, of course, which is the Arab version of a Jewish kosher meal.
Foodies who come all over to Abu Ghosh to taste their hummus, their famous hummus, have also discovered another secret in this village. It's their sweets, Arabic and Turkish sweets, that they say are also the best.
And that brings us to the coffee shop next door, which specializes in different types of baklava, phyllo pastry with walnut and pistachio filling, and kenefe, pastry layered with cheese. These are soaked in sweet syrup water and best enjoyed with strong Arabic coffee. And with Jerusalem out of my head for now, it's time to head to Tel Aviv by the sea, the country's most modern and cosmopolitan city. So, as they say in Israel, while Jerusalem prays, Tel Aviv plays. That's next after the break. Maybe it's a sea breeze or the typical Mediterranean joie de vivre. Because the further you are from Jerusalem, the lighter, freer one tends to feel. Especially in Tel Aviv, the unabashedly liberal and hedonistic city of Israel. It's the final stop in our week-long visit to the country that is too often portrayed as a hotbed of intolerance and conflict. And maybe that's why Tel Aviv is called a bubble, like a separate country within the country. And in a way it is, because while the rest of Israel's cities trace their history back by thousands of years, Tel Aviv, established only in the early part of the last century, is a baby, the first new Jewish city in 2,000 years. A city built by the returning Jews of the diaspora from scratch, literally, on the sand dunes of a beach, which, incidentally, is the best place to start a tour of this sunny metropolis. Tel Aviv's 14-kilometer beachfront is like the city's backyard. It's where the local population congregates on weekends or at the end of each day. You can walk, bike, or in my case, rent a Segway and go from one end of Tel Aviv's coastline to the other, passing through its 13 public beaches along a scenic promenade that's uninterrupted by obstacles or cars. Though open to all, each beach attracts a certain type of crowd or lifestyle.
Right, Tel Aviv is known for its inclusivity. And we just passed the Gay Pride Beach or the Pride Beach. Over here is the Dog Beach. You guessed it, it's a beach where dogs can enjoy the sun and sand. Let's take a look.
Speaking of outfits, only modest beachwear is allowed on Nordau Beach, where Orthodox Jewish women are segregated from the men. But everywhere else is as liberal as a city can be, with an all-day party vibe that extends to the night.
I hear people say it, that Tel Aviv is like a different country altogether, vastly different from the rest of Israel. And I have to agree, at least in this part of the city, it feels more like Miami Beach.
Tel Aviv has the highest standard of quality of life in Israel, thanks in part to progressive city planning and urban regeneration programs that have transformed places like the Old Port into a vast leisure park.
Amazing, such a green, livable, and sustainable city. Well, that's Tel Aviv.
Of course, it helps that Tel Aviv was built without the baggage of history or religion, weighing down its vision of a modern international city. And that's what makes the city's eclectic architectural style so cool.
Remember that the vast majority of immigrants that settled in Tel Aviv in the first half of the 20th century were Jews from Europe, and they took with them their favorite architectural styles from the continent. This building behind me is a great example of Art Deco architecture. And if you're a big fan of modern architecture, Tel Aviv is a place for you.
Art Deco and Art Nouveau are well represented in Tel Aviv, but it's 1930s Bauhaus architecture that has come to define the city, built largely by European immigrants and funds from prominent Jews overseas.
Every great city has its grand boulevard. Paris has the Champs-Élysées, New York, Fifth Avenue. Here in Tel Aviv, it's Rothschild Avenue. It's named after the man, the tycoon, who helped build the city with his money.
In and around Rothschild Avenue are the best examples of Bauhaus in the city, and perhaps the world. The simple, functional, and affordable architectural type was ideal for immigrants in a rush to build quickly and relatively cheaply.
Beautiful, especially this one over here. And this one is being restored. There's a lot of restoration work going on with Tel Aviv's Bauhaus buildings. And that's because Tel Aviv takes great pride in being the one city in the world with the most number of Bauhaus buildings.
Unlike the Jews and Arabs that remained in the Holy Land for centuries, the new wave of immigrants that settled in Tel Aviv expressed their identity through their homes differently, with a heady mix of imagination, nostalgia, and kitsch.
This is one of the prettiest spots in Tel Aviv. Although it looks like a rural European village, it's not. It's actually right in the middle of the big city. This was built by Germans who moved to Israel. That's why it's called the German colony. And that's also why the architecture here looks more like it's from Western Europe than Western Israel.
Known among Jews as Sarona, the original village was established by German Templars, missionary Christian families who settled in the late 19th century in what was then an empty part of the country. The Templars have long disappeared, but their homes were carefully restored, and since 2006, they now form the nucleus of the most pleasant and family-friendly commercial development in Tel Aviv's central business district. The new Sarona Market Food Hall is a great place to understand just how global and cosmopolitan Tel Aviv's residents are. You'll find the cuisines of every major part of the world here, including the Middle East, of course, with most of the establishments free to flout the rules of kosher. For a more authentic and local taste of Tel Aviv, however, there's no better place than Carmel Market, the oldest and largest open-air market in the city. What locals call Shuk HaKarmel is rooted in the souks and bazaars of North Africa and the Middle East, from which most of the Jewish immigrants who sell their goods here are from originally.
Away from the elegant streets of Rothschild Avenue is Carmel Market. This is where you get to see a more multicultural side of Tel Aviv. You hear all sorts of languages here, including Filipino.
Skip the tacky souvenir section, with stuff probably made in China or India, and head straight to the fruit and vegetable stalls that sell fresh produce from farms all across Israel. Not to miss, fresh squeezed, healthy pomegranate juice, a local specialty. The food market is a riot of colors, sounds, textures, and smells that give you a taste of the original recipes and food cultures of both Jewish and non-Jewish immigrants. And journeys to places as far off as Mexico or Thailand.
It doesn't get more multicultural than this. You have non-kosher meat here, including pork and offal stuff outlawed by the Bible, at least for those who follow it strictly. Well, proof again indeed that Tel Aviv is like a different country.
We've seen the destructive effect of religion elsewhere in Israel, but perhaps here in Tel Aviv, trade and commerce help keep the peace. Like any part of the region, there will always be threats to security, though here they're few and far between. Indeed, in Tel Aviv, you're more likely to be in danger of having a horrible hangover. When we return after the break, we spend our last day in Tel Aviv exploring its oldest quarter, and our last night in a wild club crawl in this hedonistic city. Welcome back to the final segment of our series on Israel, a journey that ends in Tel Aviv, one of the country's youngest cities.
Tel Aviv is an infant compared to the other cities of Israel. The city was only established in 1909, but there's a section of the metropolitan city that's actually thousands of years older. It's this part, Jaffa.
Many don't realize Tel Aviv is both one of the youngest and oldest cities of Israel combined. Known officially as Tel Aviv-Yafo, the metropolitan area covers the ancient biblical city of Jaffa, one of the oldest settlements in the world. In its more than 3,000-year history, Jaffa was alternately settled and conquered by almost every great kingdom and empire that ruled the region, bringing with them their Jewish, Muslim, and Christian traditions, whose landmarks still stand in the old town. The Arab-Israeli War and the rise of Tel Aviv as an alternative place to live have reduced the number of the original inhabitants within the walled city. After a long period of decay, Old Jaffa is experiencing a renaissance today. Much of what you see was reconstructed since the 60s and now houses galleries and shops for upscale locals and tourists. Though Jaffa's ancient churches and mosques still attract the local faithful, the surrounding neighborhood now draws the young of Tel Aviv to its colorful street culture.
This is a young and fun neighborhood. I must say, it's great to be in a place with very little, if no reference whatsoever, to the Bible or to history. Let's explore.
This is where Jaffa's famous flea market is found, the perfect backdrop for the indie boutiques, third-wave cafes, and ethnic restaurants that have sprouted all over the place. The flea market is an old Jaffa institution. This is once where poor residents bought and sold their wares, though you're more likely to find hipsters scouring the markets for vintage find these days.
For Tel Aviv's millennials, vintage is cool. But remember, these things, the stuff over here, these are things from their grandparents and great-grandparents' time, the early wave of immigrants to Israel. You know what? These were probably the only prized possessions they had at that time. Today, it's just cool.
At sundown, the bars begin to open, and the market transforms into a street party. Though in Tel Aviv, the party is just starting, so there's no need to rush, except perhaps to find a perfect spot on Jaffa's beachfront to enjoy the glorious sunset. A typical night on the town starts with dinner, usually a quiet one, in order to conserve energy for the bar hopping that comes later. Tel Aviv's restaurant scene is currently one of the most talked about in foodie circles. Rich, young, liberal, and multinational, it's hard not to see why.
The name of this restaurant is Vicky Cristina, after the film Vicky Cristina Barcelona of Woody Allen, who happens to be a Jew, by the way. So this is a Spanish restaurant. And you know Spanish food, jamon, gambas, stuff that's prohibited under kosher rules. But this is Tel Aviv. Anything goes.
The popular Vicky Cristina, in the courtyard of the city's old train station, is part of a new generation of restaurants that goes beyond traditional Jewish flavors and restrictions.
Right, this is the first set of tapas we're having, and over here we have some shrimp. Again, this is something you won't find in a kosher restaurant. Something you probably won't find in Jerusalem at all. This is shrimp. Remember the rule. If it's a sea creature without gills, you can't have it. But I can because I'm in Tel Aviv.
And not just shrimp, but pork and squid and other ingredients considered taboo.
Wow, this is really good. Don't get me wrong. I have nothing against Jewish or Arabic food. In fact, I've really enjoyed the last few meals I've had here in Israel. But every now and then, you want something sinful, right? So let's sin tonight.
I was only referring to food, of course, but there's a lot of other irreverent things to enjoy in Tel Aviv at night. So I've booked a professional guide who's quite the expert in the local nightlife.
You must be Dror, right?
Yeah, David, nice to
hello.
meet you.
Okay, so I found you online.
Yes.
And that's how it works. That's how clients book you for a tour.
Yeah. Let me show you the town.
Just so you know, weekends in Israel start on Thursday and end on Saturday. But Dror assures me that every day in Tel Aviv, even the Shabbat, the holy day of rest, is a good day to party.
Like,
The night starts at 11 o'clock.
yeah,
Okay.
but you can do something before that. Like
Okay.
usually we go to eat something at
I just
8.
had dinner. What's a typical night out on a Thursday night, for example? At least your style.
First, you have to eat something,
Okay.
and then after you eat, you go to a bar.
Okay,
and
check.
then,
I'm done with the eating.
yeah, so now we have to go to a bar, and then to a dance bar, and then to a nightclub.
What's the difference of a dance bar and a nightclub?
Let me show you.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Tel Aviv is a global tech capital, and Dror shows me how to book with Autotel, a car sharing app that's as cool as it's practical. Ride, park, and walk the rest of the way is how locals get to their first bar of the night.
This is the Kuli Alma, the place that we're going to. As I told you before, places don't last here for long. This one is over like 4 or 5 years, which is a lot.
Test of time.
Yeah, and this is the hipster's shrine. You have to come here if you're a hipster.
The hipster shrine. Okay.
Kuli Alma is Aramaic for the whole world, and it does seem the whole world of young and beautiful locals are packed in this subterranean courtyard. The whole world can also mean a whole range of experiences or types of crowd to suit you. They have a dance floor, a long bar, even a vintage clothing store, and an art gallery with exhibitions that change weekly.
The artist.
Yes, I am the artist. Yeah. So I created this experience in order to disconnect you from outside and bring you into a new world, my world of spiritual and philosophical beliefs. And it's a real mind experience. Yeah.
Immersive experience.
It is immersive.
All right.
Exactly.
All right. So let's immerse
Let's
ourselves.
do it.
Kuli Alma provides young artists like Gal Vardy with instant exposure to like-minded people.
It's about how on one hand we're this endless energy and our potential is so everlasting, and on the other hand we're nostalgic creatures.
The raw energy in Kuli Alma is exhilarating, but at my age, a bit tiring.
This is the chilling area. Okay, this is more age appropriate.
Yeah.
It's also the only quiet spot to plan our next move. We decide on Sputnik, a short walk away. A bar with an even more diverse crowd. That's code for someone a bit more mature like me. Having Dror as your guide gets you through the long queues and first-name basis with the owners of the bars in his itinerary.
Why'd you call it Sputnik?
The place.
Yeah.
Why we call the name? I don't have exactly
a great
the
name,
reason.
though.
Yeah, but we like the vibe of the wood and spacey, like do it together. So I don't know, Sputnik sounds good.
Of course it does, especially after a couple of glasses of this powerful stuff. It's a familiar formula I think the locals seem to love. A multi-level space where multiple experiences simultaneously take place. If you're bored in here, then why not move there? Or maybe slip back door and up the stairs to Sputnik's boutique hotel. Dror thinks it's impossible to experience Tel Aviv's nightlife without getting a glimpse of its famous gay scene.
Tel Aviv,
Necessarily
it's
like
the
that.
liberal, very liberal city. It's the gayest city in the Middle East, the biggest gay parade
Really?
ever. And you're gonna see here what is really unique about Tel Aviv is that everybody lives together. You're gonna see gay couple or the lesbian couple walking hands with hands.
People are tolerant. Which brings us to Bordel Bar, popular with gays, along with everyone else, eager for a high-octane way to cap the evening. And before you know it, it's way past midnight, and the party in Tel Aviv is in full swing. It's a strange way to end a journey that began in places so holy. But maybe that's what Israel is all about. A land so many all over the world claim to know, from the Bible, from literature, or from the news, yet never truly comprehend. Indeed, perhaps only by visiting Israel can one understand this contradictory land, both ancient and modern, holy and profane, Arab and Jew.
And that's all for this series on Israel. I'm David Sadran. Thanks for watching. Shalom.